Hey, good evening, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Welcome to our live show. We are in my backyard tonight. It is such a pleasant evening out, and my plum tree is in full blossom right now. So here we are. We got Bill, we got Dave. You guys know them. And we're going to talk live Steam tonight. We have a guest with us. His name is Bob Collins, and I'm going to bring Bob in right now so he's not sitting in the green room all by himself for too long. Bob, welcome aboard here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on tonight. And thanks for letting us invade your property a weekend ago to film some live Steam.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So
Tonight's why we call this garden railroading.
Yeah, we're out in the garden. So
No more snow.
No more snow. And we set up a remote camera over in my garden so you guys can see my trains are running around there. And I guess if you see anything derail, let me know. I can hit the old panic button and stop it. So enjoy the side screen there while we're talking. A little bit of club news. I know tomorrow night is our news table meeting. So those of us involved in the news table will be planning our first meeting that's coming up at the end of this month. That's down at the Spangler's house on the 25th. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, the 25th, Sunday the 25th, 2 to 4. Now, no promises, but if we have a good Wi-Fi signal down there, I'm going to try to broadcast live from our meeting, but no promises. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and it may not work. But I'll do a review of the whole meeting on a YouTube video for everyone to see. They have a really nice railroad down there, and we have a make and take project. And if you want to make one of the projects, make sure you go on to our CGRS website and sign up for it ahead of time so we know how many projects are needed for everybody. I haven't heard how that project is coming along, but I believe it's a footbridge of some sort, small G-scale footbridge that Mr. Winkle is making for us. So we are getting flooded with comments already, so I'm hoping that it's saying, "Hey, we can't hear you." Now everything looks good. So, well, welcome to all of our viewers. It's a lot of our regular viewers. Just a lot of the usual characters seem to be chiming in already. So,
speaking of Jed, after our last meeting, we went to Entertainment Junction, right? And we had the swap meet there, which was huge success. A lot of tables, a lot of really good stuff. But we got to meet some folks that actually watched this that were from out of state, so that was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So if you're watching, hey,
yeah,
thanks.
if you're
welcome back.
Yeah, welcome back, and thanks for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed yet, please go down and subscribe. I don't know, I guess it's probably over in this corner, and hit that subscribe button. We are desperate for subscribers. We need to get over that 1,000 subscriber mark to open up some goodies that YouTube offers once you have 1,000 subscribers.
Just 900 more.
Just 900 more. Your average of 2 a week is so. But yeah, it's a beautiful evening out, and Dave brought a little adult beverage, and mine took a tumble over already, but I drank most of it anyway. So.
I'm driving Steam tonight, so I had to stay sober.
He's hot under the collar tonight. So
yeah, there we go.
So shall we get into our video program? Yeah. Is there anything we want to touch before this? We pre-recorded a video of all the steps you got to take to run live Steam. We just didn't know how finicky they could be the night of, and it could have been raining tonight for all we knew. And, it would have been tough, and I don't think my wife would appreciate live Steam in my basement. I don't know, you would be okay with it. No.
Yeah.
It's not all that bad, really. You're only running one engine at a time.
Probably not. Yeah.
So Jed, I will say, so I knew nothing about live Steam until we went over to Bob's house about a week and a half ago, and I wasn't very excited because I didn't really know what to expect. Never been around it. I have enough headaches just trying to get my train to run in the backyard, but I'll tell you, I see myself in the future once you get some time under your belt with the regular stuff, like really getting into live steam, because it was exciting to watch, and it was a lot of work, which this video will show, but I think the payoff is great.
The payoff is great, and the experience and the smell and the sounds of live steam. And well, they had some frustration of live steam too, right?
Well, of course, that's part of the fun.
That's part of the fun.
But that was edited out. So.
Yeah, we edited all the problems out. So, Bob, we're going to go over to your house here and start up the video, and we'll just talk over top here.
Okay, y'all come on.
So we're heading into your backyard. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your railroad here?
Well, the railroad, the current one, has been in place about 8 years, going on 9 years, and our original layout is underneath it, but it was a lot smaller, and I decided to enlarge it mainly so my wife could see it from her vantage point in the addition. And one thing led to another, and I went with the crushed limestone, mainly because the ease of changing your mind without having to cut some more wood, cut some more ballast, cut anything. So what we're doing, we're floating, I guess the phrase is, just like the big guys. And to change your mind is very easy. You just uncouple the track, put it somewhere else, and make sure everything hooks up, and you have power, and you're good to go.
Here's our first live steam engine.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. Oh, sorry. Okay. So a little bit of an electric there.
Yeah. So
to clean the track.
Yeah. So to clear the way. So Bill, here's your box of goodies, and do you want to tell us what's in your box of goodies here?
Well, I got out the 4 main elements that is necessary when you're starting up the steam engine. Number 1, distilled water. 2, steam oil. 3, in my case, butane. 4, a little good old 3-in-1 oil, and most importantly, the fire extinguisher in case you forget how in case an accident happens here. Always good to have them both indoors and out. You never know when. The butane is this exact same material that you use in lighters. And the distilled water is just that. It has to be distilled from a steam evaporator so that you don't leave any residual chemicals or any kind of minerals inside the engine once it's steamed, to keep the cylinders and everything else clean. You're looking at me right now filling up the propane tank that's contained on the engine, and you know it's full when it off gas from the little connection. We'll show this a little bit after the video is done too, up close. So the first thing we typically do is make sure we have a full fuel tank inside the engine based off the butane. And after that, we'll start in on the next material. Spent a lot of time talking.
Yeah, you did talk in there a lot. Okay,
so there's our water, our distilled water, and in my case, I injected into the boiler by way of a large syringe, and it'll take about 120 milliliters of water in the boiler for the G-scale equipment, and it's just pushed back in. And simply, what we do is fill up the boiler pretty much till it overflows the filler cap. In our case here, we wound up having to take a few shots at the boiler to get all the material, get a full run time on it.
It took a lot more water than I guessed that it would.
We were being real careful too.
I didn't want to spill anything.
Yeah, I didn't want to spill that important water and dirty up the engine there.
I found that butane propane mix will kind of extend your seasons for running live steam. The butane is okay kind of for the hot months, June, July, August, and maybe September. But your mix of the 2 gases will extend your running season quite a bit.
Yeah, I paused it here real quick. You can see a little water level here. I think you can see my my mouse. You can see the water level, so you can tell when you're full.
There's a sight glass in most of the engines that'll allow you to determine where your water level is in the boiler. Yes, certainly in filling it up, but more importantly while you're running, because just like the real thing, you don't want to let the water drop down too far in the boiler before you shut the fire off. Otherwise, you'll experience the same problem the real ones do.
However, with that sight glass, Chip Rosenblum doesn't hold much weight as to what you see is what you get. He's had a lot of tough experiences with thinking the water was there and it wasn't.
Would that be the water tension just kind of siphoning up the tube or siphoning down the tube, probably?
Or the whatever.
What you just watched there, I just simply plugged the top of the boiler with a gasketed nut in order to seal it off to finish the water filling operation. And now we're getting to checking the oil, cylinder oil, steam oil in direct format. Every time you run, you want to make sure that the water that has collected in the receiver from the previous run is emptied out, which is exactly what I'm doing right there and watching the water drip down on the ballast, which is why you don't want to do this in the house on the carpet, by the way.
Yeah.
And then plugging it back up to be able to refill the container. And the function of the steam oil is to lubricate the interior of the cylinders while the engine's running in order to keep wear and tear down. And the steam oil is, interestingly enough, a special oil that contains, most of them still contain tallow, just like the real steam engines did, because it's found that it evaporates under steam pressure, does a fine job of lubricating, and is a relatively inexpensive lubricant. And as long as we still keep working through cows, we'll be good on the tallow, I guess, at this point. There you see me plugging the cap on that too. So now all the caps for all the propane, the boiler water, and the steam oil are all back in their original position. So at that point, it's a matter of starting the propane into the boiler in order to light the fire. And in the process on how we do that, we simply open up the front of the smoke box of the engine and ignite it with a extended lighter in order to start the flame inside that'll warm the water. You can see the front of the smoke box here with the hinged opening.
This is when we all backed up.
Yeah, because you want to adjust the propane because it's liquid propane initially, and light it in a timely manner because you notice it just flashed off there. And if you leave it run too much, well, it'll flash off even more. But you see down there in the boiler a little blue flame, just like you'd expect on a lighter. Well, that's exactly what's happening inside there. And therefore, the flame will start the process of heating up the water in the boiler to make steam here soon enough.
Now, we have a question from one of our esteemed viewers here. How often do you flush or clean the system?
Well, number one, I would say if you use legitimate distilled water that is made from evaporating water, and therefore it is strictly H2O, no contaminants in it. I can't say yet, after I got 5 years on some of my equipment, I've not had any need to, as you're implying, flushing the system. Now understand, these are model boilers, and therefore they don't have flues or tubes like you'd see on the real live steam engine. Simply, it's a basic, what you're looking at through the smoke box here is one simply large flue, if you want to consider it as such. So it's not difficult. Unlike even some of the larger scale steam engines where you're using coal or some other fuel source, the propane is a very clean source and doesn't require a lot of cleaning. At least I haven't had to clean anything on my end of it so far.
The only thing is the oiler that really needs flushing, so to speak.
Yeah. Like I say, each time you run it, you're going to gather water in that cylinder, in that container, and you can either, in my case, I have this bottom valve that I can let the water drip out of. In some cases where there is no bottom plug like that, you literally have to suck out with another syringe the oil water mix before you put new steam oil back in the cylinder, and that gets kind of messy.
So hearing all that,
on my Ruby though, I can sometimes get 2 runs out of a full oil cylinder before I have to flush it out or drain it out.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, Bill, saying all of that, like if you've never done steam or been around it, I can see that being a big turnoff because it sounds like so much work. But again, watching you guys do this, it was such a payoff, like to actually see it go around. And Jed, you made the joke about when we lit that, everyone backing up. But part of the thing that's been edited out is all the horror stories we've heard about steam building up to it. So, so there is some legitimacy to that backing up.
We all had mustaches before we did it.
Yeah.
What you're looking at here. Okay, so while the water or the steam pressure is starting to build in the unit, you can see a little bit of smoke coming out of the stack here. Now's the time that we go ahead and use our basic, in my case, 3-in-1 oil to make sure you lubricate all the mechanical parts on the engine. Just like the real thing, everything needs to be lubed up. Another reason why you don't do this indoors on the carpet. So any moving part, any gear, any shaft, any drive cylinder, and in this case, this engine is a 2-cylinder Shea. Therefore, there are 2 cylinders here, and each have their own drive shafts. And then you have this common horizontal shaft that runs completely across one side of the engine, just like the real ones. And all those parts need oiled so that you don't wear and tear them during the operation, the running portion of the fun here.
So you just got to hit all the moving parts.
Yeah, front side, back side.
How long do you think it took to?
Normally, to start a steam, to prep the engine and start it up, you're looking usually about 20 minutes.
Okay.
And that's usually on a dry start. Once you've been running the engine, there are different components of time. Beyond the little bit of dust you're looking at there, you're seeing now the boiler's just beginning to heat up enough to run up to the pressure relief valve.
Yeah, so Bob, I'll let you take it from here and describe what you're working on with your trains. You were on the other side.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. You were on the other side of the railroad, steaming up your train. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your stuff? This
is a Ruby. It's also AccuCraft. Do not have a gauge on this one, but if, after running it enough, you get to learn your engine. So, I'll just fire it up and let the boiler come up to temperature. And when my pop-off valve, which they all have safety valves, starts making funny noises like it's trying to spit at me, that usually means I can fire it up. Now, generally with some steam engines, as goofy as it sounds, if you go backward first, it helps to clean the cylinders. That's what I'm doing there. It ran better backwards than it did forward. But just a little bit, then you fire it up and let it do its thing.
You'll notice Bob has gloves on. That's because he's the expert here. he's been down. Yeah, he's been down the road before and walked away with singed fingers if where the gloves help out.
Well, there you can hear the noise. The noise is coming from the boiler. the burner, and you get a small wire mesh that seems to cover that, and when you do change it, it'll take the sound away. But it doesn't always do it, but it's kind of a telltale sign of the rubies. I think to do it again, as much fun as I've had with it, I would start out with a kit. IQCAF makes a ruby kit. And the basic thing is getting things together and just have to brush up on your soldering skills. Aside from that, it probably would be a blast. Pardon my pun.
So, Bill, you were showing me here. Tell me what this is.
In the case of these engines here, the Shays, just like the real thing, they have a Johnson bar inside whose job is to provide forward, to adjust the gear, adjust the valve gears for either forward, reverse, or in where it is right now, neutral position. So just like the real thing, you got to move it forward for the engine to go forward. And I'm adjusting the fire in the boiler. I'm sorry, we're adjusting the water off the cylinders right now.
Right, and at this point, you had already steamed down. You were just kind of demonstrating the Johnson bar.
Yeah.
But we'll get back to some trains moving here in a second.
The fun thing about the Shays are they're a geared engine, and they do accept up and down grades a lot better than the rod engines in most cases. There you can see it running now. And so all the parts are important because all the parts have to move in order to move the engine. In the case of the Shays, all the operating gear is on one side. The other side's pretty plain Jane.
Yeah. Now, you talk about being equipped for running up hills. Do they make a cogged steam engine thing? You know of any?
I only know of one.
On the American end of things, I haven't really seen any, but I wouldn't put it past the European crowd to finagle a way to gear a live steamer that'll then go up a cog. It'd have to be highly geared because of the cylinder operation. What you're looking at there is me pulling the cab roof off and on in order just to check. There's a gauge in there on mine that gives me an indication of the steam pressure. Normally the engine will start somewhere around 20. There's the pop valve going off. So I've actually have more propane being fired in the boiler than probably what I should. Therefore, I'm kind of wasting a bit of the steam here. So there's a bit of putzing around and a bit of adjustment on things. Smells great. It's fun to run.
There's no speed control, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's the throttle will adjust your speed operation in there.
But it's something you set up initially and it goes.
Well, yeah. For example, with the Shays, you can set it for a given speed, and it'll pretty much stay there whether you're going up and down a grade or not. If you wanted to do a lot of adjustments, some of the folks go ahead and use servos with a remote control. But the half the fun of this is just literally the hands-on aspects of the live steam business. One of the great things with Bob's Railroad is because it's up at waist height here, it makes accessing the engines a lot easier versus either down on the ground or up on a high trestle somewhere. And it really gives you the feel of you're basically operating a live steam engine is really the bottom line. A simplified version, granted, but it's as close as we've gotten in the hobby to operating the real thing here. And that's
the one I'm working on is about as simple as it gets. If you could understand the principles there, then the rest of it's downhill. But one thing that they have to be aware of is as the water in your boiler is being turned to steam, you have more space above the water in the boiler. Therefore, you get a higher steam buildup. And what you do is some of the pop-off that you saw in Bill's engine So you just turn the boiler down a little bit. And another thing, keep an eye on I won't say speedometer, but the speed of the engine, because as you're using more, the boiler is getting under more pressure. So you want to slow things down a little bit. Otherwise, the train will start running away, so to speak.
Yeah.
What I'm doing there is a sterno-powered home brew. And I'm the sterno is underneath. You can see it there in the red and the pink. And I fired it up and I check with my hand to see if that's my test.
If it's on.
Yeah.
Yeah, he took his gloves off.
Yeah, he took his gloves off.
Bob, can you talk a little bit more about this? Because you made this, right? By buying parts off the internet, and you can find this online. But when I saw this, I was in love with it. And there's certain things in this hobby, when you see it, you're like, I need that. And this was one of the ones for me. Like, I had never seen it. I was big into moonshiners when it was on TV, and it's the
same thing.
Yeah, same idea.
I'm like, oh, I need this thing. So,
but the sterno's underneath. Right now, the sterno is powering up the water, which is in that tank, and then the steam will go through the blue tube, through the oil. Here we have the oiler again.
Yep.
It picks up the oil. What I'm trying to do is, it's getting close to the temperature, so to speak, and this one is geared. It has a flywheel on it, and it's a single. I see it's a single piston, and it's very, very. Here it goes.
Yeah, there we go.
yeah.
Now to make this go backward, I have to switch the connectors, put the tube on the front of it, and that's how it would go backward. But this is very simple, very basic. Yes, it's geared, so it doesn't worry too much about grades. And you can get, come up with a goofy car you put behind it or anything. But I acquired this from somebody in our club whose father had started building a boat, which used the engine as the main device. And he didn't want it, so I just took the engine and built this other one, which has been kind of fun. And it's here again, the butane. Well, it'll run maybe 15, 20 minutes. There's no control on it. You just let it fire up, and when it runs out of butane, which is generally before it runs out of water, it just stops.
Yeah. Well, here's a nice little slow motion view of your overall layout. So, thanks for opening it up for us to kind of play around in your yard. And
my pleasure, anytime.
Yeah, Bill's got one of these engines on the desk here, and we're gonna switch over and kind of take a look up close at a few things. And if anyone has any questions, we'll be happy to take them.
One of the points that just passed by in the end of the video there is, just like any of the Garden Railway scale, I'll talk scale a little bit. Most of the engines have been made by a few companies, the live steamers I'm speaking of, and or to be roughly in the F scale category, 1 to 20.3. Some are a little bit smaller in the 1 to 24th scale. And in that last view that we breezed by there is one of Bob's 7/8 scale.
Yes.
Which essentially, so what does it mean in the big picture? Well, most of the engines are geared to represent 3-foot gauge. For example, the ones you saw in the picture, the video, the one I got here tonight. The 7/8 scale basically represents 2-foot gauge track. Therefore, the engines, the parts are a little bit bigger. And then there's quite a contingent in the what would represent standard gauge track. Same track, but it's representing standard gauge 4'8" and therefore the equipment's a little bit smaller than even what we've shown everybody here tonight. But it all still runs all the same basic concepts here. Most of the time, so we've shown you some alcohol fuel. That's what Bob showed there towards the end, the pink fuel material. In my engine, we showed it being fired by butane. There's even a minor contingent, but for those who just really can't get away from live coal, hard to find. But there's actually some of the engines that will actually allow you to use live small pieces of coal to generate the fire in the boiler with. And those take immense amounts of putzing around, but the point is that they are operational, and it's again another aspect of feeling like you're a real engineer with a live steam engine in the scheme of things. Most of these units run in the 25 psi, pounds per square inch category in terms of the boilers. There is the safety valves, like you saw, popping off, that prevent the steam from getting much. I think 40 is usually the top end of it. And the boilers are all hydro tested. Well, most of the boilers are hydro tested for pressures in excess of that. So from a safety perspective, it's very, very unlikely that you'd have a rupture of the boilers per se. Now, if, like you didn't see, I think we edited it out in the video. Both Jed and I, we were so concentrated on videotaping inside the engine, we weren't paying attention to the pop-off valve, and proceeded to get a little bit of face full of steam off of that function because there's no pre-warning on when the pop-off valve is going to go. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of excitement associated with that, but it's all clean, live steam, and hey, what can I say? Yeah. I thought if you want to run down questions, your eyes are better than mine as far as answering any specifics. But I brought another engine, again, another 1-to-20 scale engine. In this case, this is a representation of one of the original Denver and South Park engines, the 266 versions that were one of the very first types that ran out west. And in some cases, actually, were similar to a few of the engines that ran in New York City elevated systems. But all the basic pieces parts with regard to operational live steam are still here in slightly different formats. You'll see down here in the case of this engine, unlike my Shea, this butane tank is horizontally mounted to fit inside the tender on this engine. And it has two advantages to it in this case for this particular engine. One, you can place water in the tender, and the advantage there is it'll keep the butane in the tank at a more stabilized temperature. I know Bob began to comment in the video portion that as you exhaust the butane, it by its very nature tends to cool off. I'm sorry, it'll heat up some because of the steam in the boiler area, and therefore you'll get a higher pressure coming out of the butane tank. When you surround it with water, you obviously stabilize the temperature better, and therefore can maintain steaming without a whole bunch of adjustments a lot easier. And in this case, because there's also then water in the tender, as opposed, in addition to being in the boiler, I have the opportunity to go ahead through a valve down here, even when this engine is running and or before the boiler cools down, to actually inject water into the boiler by pumping it like you're seeing me doing here. Whereas the Shea that you saw earlier that was out running, I pretty much got to let it run about 25 minutes and exhaust the water and the propane out of it, and then let it cool down, and then open the boiler back up and refill it with water, put more butane back in the canister to start another run with it. So we're getting around 25-30 minutes of run time normally off of the engines. In that case, if you have the ability to inject water into the boiler, well, just like a real steam engine that uses an injector, as a matter of fact, then you can continue to run. It's just no different than when the engines had to stop at water tanks to fill up with more water and fuel, but had the ability to continue the operation of the steam engines while the boilers were still hot. So depending on the type of engine you get and the extra accessories, that capability is there too. So that's a couple more things you get to play with in the process of running your engine.
Yeah, we have a question. How do you adjust speed? Stop them if needed.
Well,
Scott's got
okay.
tons of great questions.
Yeah, this
There we
guy
go.
is on top of it.
There we go. Okay, we'll see. Okay, I'll use this engine right here. Here is the throttle right here, and as I adjust this, that will determine the amount of steam allowed into the cylinders, and therefore will determine the speed of the engine. So obviously, more steam in the engine, the faster the engine will go. The slower, the less speed the engine gains in the process. So this is your main control here. Normally, in my case here, this is the valve that controls the amount of butane going into the boiler. You tend to want to try to set that and forget it and keep the same amount of butane and therefore the same kind of fire going on in the boiler at all times. So your ability to vary is complements of the amount of steam you allow out of the boiler into the cylinders. It's exactly the same thing as a real live steam engine. This isn't, you'd think of this as the throttle that's on normally the back of the steam boiler inside a real live steam engine, and it is. It's just that this is configured slightly differently, but performs the same function as the real one does. While I'm in here, there's our sight glass down in the very bottom. A little tough to see with the camera angle, but you get the basic idea. There it is.
Yeah.
And here in this case, the same configuration. Here's our steam oil container here. This one I have the ability with a valve to adjust the amount of steam oil that goes into the cylinders. So there's a little bit of putzing around with that. If you use too much, you'll go through too much steam oil, and you want to adjust it so that you basically run out of steam, water in the boiler, and propane in the tank at about the same time you run out of.
And how often does that happen?
The steam oil, actually, you'll probably get at least 2, if not 3 runs out of it when it's adjusted correctly.
Yeah.
Because that's the least amount of normal putts around. But normally each run you definitely have to keep water in the boiler. That's the main thing. And then maybe every 2 runs you'll wind up putting propane back into the cylinder for use inside the boiler.
So good news for Corey is when we build that thing that Bob showed us, that 1-car moonshiner thing.
There you go.
We'll learn all about it, Corey, so don't worry.
There you go. See?
We'll expect that for our next show.
Right, yeah.
Well, one other aspect of this component of the hobby, as a number of our so back to our club, the CGRS group that runs G-scale for the most part, outdoor garden railroads, we have approximately, in round numbers, 100 members. Out of that 100 membership, there's a dozen to dozen and a half of us. I'll put it at 18. Is that fair, Bob? There's about 18 of us at different.
More or less, that's correct.
Yeah. That also run the live steam aspects of things. Now, we will say, unlike maybe some of the G-scale layouts that have sharp curves and, like Jeb's, incredible grades, you don't want to do that with live steam. Actually, live steam just simply, for the most part, won't allow you to do that.
Out for me.
You got it. It likes large radius turns like you saw on Bob's railroad. And it also likes gentle grades. You can have grades, but they ought to be gentle, not steep, because it distinctly affects the operational characteristics of the engines as a general rule.
The funny part about some of the live steam, I found that they sometimes tend to run better with more weight. If you load down the cars, behind that black one that Bill alluded to earlier, I run a bunch of marbles in those dumper cars, and it really smooths it out and just makes it for a smoother operation, and it will run pretty good with extra weight in there.
Yeah, it's amazing with these little engines that they are very powerful. And basically back to the real life, the real things. Steam pressure is an amazing feature that has a lot of mechanical effort behind it. And even the small scale live steamers will push the drivers. The drivers will move and can pull a lot of cars as a result. A lot of times a little faster than maybe we would prefer, which is kind of like why I like the geared engines over the standard rod engines. But all of them are fun to play with. And that's really the bottom line here is your enjoyment as a hobbyist in working with, in this case, the engines and being the engineer as close to the real thing as you're probably going to get in this scale of things. Any questions?
Yeah, we got a question from Mr. Productions here. Thank you for phoning this one in. You explained things used in a run or 2 runs, but how long is a run considered? 15 minutes or 30 minutes? I don't know. I'm guessing about 2 hours.
Without being glib, I could answer yes to both. Each engine, depending on the size of the boiler, therefore the amount of water and even the amount of propane, will in part determine how long each run is. Now, I think in most cases, you can anticipate somewhere in the 20 to 30 minute time frame. I think Bob, in your case, for the homemade engine there that ran off alcohol, how much run time do you get out of that?
I've never really checked that because I don't care. I just enjoy watching it putsy around.
Yeah.
But here again, you learn your engine, and you'll find if you run it a number of times, you can run it a little slower speed, which means you won't need as much fuel being burned. So you can get 30, 35 minutes out of a run. But here again, you learn your engine. And normally there's a tendency at first, and you just want to see it run. Well, then it may run a little fast. Okay, then it won't run as long. Then you say, well, if I turn this down, if I turn that down, as it starts using up water in the boiler, I can run on less pressure. In fact, some of my engines have gone around the track a couple of times with no burner going at all. It's just the steam pressure in the boiler itself.
So what kind of resources, especially in Central Ohio here, can people look for? I know in the wintertime you have a winter steam up in a gymnasium at a elementary school. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? I know it hasn't happened the last year or this past year.
Our live steam subgroup typically, I think we start in April. Start in May. We'll run May through October, weather dependent, because we are outside. And we meet typically once a month here in Columbus, more often than not over Chip Rosenblum's. As a fine railroad over there, and it's
usually like the 3rd Sunday of the month.
Yeah, we make sure that we don't run over top of the normal CGRS monthly meeting, so it's usually the 3rd Saturday of the month. I'm sorry, Sunday of the month. Yeah.
And he's down in Bexley.
And because we only run normally during the summertime when the weather's decent, we do get the gang together. Everybody's got cabin fever normally by the middle of winter, and so we have still an indoor live steam up where we get everybody together to light the fires and have some fellowship in the process during the wintertime to ease the cabin fever problem. And you will occasionally see we've been at garden railroads, and particularly those who use a bit of the servo business in terms of operating both the throttle for the steam and the fuel valve, where they will actually operate on a regular layout, as you would with maybe an electric motored engine of a similar scale or type. So I find those always amazing too. This is predominantly a running component of the hobby. Switching, not so much. It's fun to get the engine adjusted the way you want, turn it loose for 30 minutes, sit down and watch them run. Like we were fortunate when we filmed the video, the temperature of the weather was just fine. You could see both the smoke coming out of the stacks,
yep,
and the exhaust steam along with the blow-off valve.
Now, is there a
Boy,
high
it's
and a
like-
low temperature that are typical that you have to stay within? Like, don't run over 20 degrees or -5. Where's our operating window?
It's an operator's call. If you want to run in the winter, you probably can, but you may use over 3/4 of your fuel just getting the temperature of the water up enough to create some steam.
Now, heat it up or steam it up inside and then bring it out.
Yeah.
Well, that's been tried too. You have to talk to Chip on that.
Yeah, I got to say, these aren't something that you want to really be firing up, getting nice and hot like a tea kettle, and then putting your hands down to lift it up and start moving around. I don't recommend that.
Right.
Not that you can't do that. Obviously, Bob had a pair of gloves on, but you're cruising for a bruising. I think if you kind of go that route. The idea is get these things on the track and let them run and go from there. If you're running in the wintertime, or let's say when the temperature is below 40 degrees, then yeah, you're going to have to introduce, butane doesn't work real well under low temps. And you have to incorporate propane, which is a little more low temperature capable.
But you can get it mixed. You get the butane propane mix.
Yeah.
It comes in
So you can run in the wintertime when it's below freezing and there's snow out there. There's folks that do that. So I wouldn't let that dissuade you either.
Now, what
Obviously, you'll see a lot more steam coming out of the engine, maybe even out of you at that point in the scheme of things.
What about high altitude? If you're in Denver, is it going to operate differently?
Correct. Yeah, because again, just like the real steamers, the lack of air pressure tends to require more fuel, more steam to operate mechanically at the same capability. I think that was there was a number of I think the Porters, if memory serves me right, the Porters, which were made here in the eastern over in Pennsylvania, were notorious for being dogs out in the west in the higher altitudes because they were always known as poor steamers. They just couldn't adjust to the higher altitudes.
So the Death Valley live steamers guys are loving that low altitude then.
They might briefly. I don't know how long they last out there. I can't say I recall a club being located out there. But
well, we'll let you start
is.
one.
Manufacturer-wise, probably the most dominant manufacturer in the market to this day is a company called AccuCraft. They're out of California.
Hey, can I call you back in about 15 or so? Okay.
AccuCraft imports most of their engines. These are mostly out of solid brass. Therefore, they don't rust or anything. And most of them are either, Japan, Korea, and you can get, some of them are coming from China. There is Aster, which is out of Germany. They make fine live steam engines. In fact, for those in the LGB end of things, of course, the Aster name has been associated with LGB for quite some time, and Aster made a couple of live steam engines in G scale in 1-22 for LGB. Their Frank S, I think, was one of the first in the LGB line, and those you'll still find out there in the aftermarket, occasionally for sale, because these things are pretty darn rugged. It takes a lot to really wear them out. You got to kind of screw up a lot on the no oil, no steam oil, no gear oil category to really wear equipment out.
Sounds like a challenge I'm up for.
There's a good question on the screen right now.
Any dangers involved? Yeah, there's that problem with your wife when she asks how much this thing costs. But I think Bob the Rubies, tend to start at $500-600.
Ballpark.
Number? Yeah, ballpark.
And they go up to, I've seen some as much as 4,000.
Yeah.
Those are the monsters, but
Yeah.
there's a question there, right there, about if it derails. I've had mine derail a lot. I'm wearing my gloves. The first thing I do is to turn off the throttle, so to speak, and then just put it back in the track, run the throttle, and it takes right off again. So the danger is if you're wearing no gloves, it'll be a while before you're able to fix it.
Yeah, obviously you're dealing with just because you're using butane to fire it up, and obviously the water is turned to steam, so you're up above 212 degrees Fahrenheit. You quite frankly, if you grab something, you're going to burn your fingers, and therefore a set of steaming gloves is always recommended in order to account for a derailment or something just not working the way you anticipated. Are we talking something that's going to explode? No, that's the point of all these. All these are pressure tested and actually come. I know in AccuCraft's case, with a certified boiler. So you really can't get a temperature high enough in them to actually run the risk of rupturing the boiler. Something's going to pop or break or come loose before that happens. And that's the other point of why these all have safety valves on them to reduce the pressure in the boilers way before anything would even come potentially to a point of rupturing the metal.
Yeah. So is there a quick pressure switch?
Is there a quick pressure switch?
Well, like if you run it, just release. Yeah, release. Yeah.
Not really.
Can opener in the boiler.
No, I mean, there's a couple of things you could do, but I don't recommend. I mean, you could undo for example, you could undo the plug in the steam boiler, but my gravy, you get steam, you get hot steam all over you.
Make sure you're standing over top of that.
Yeah. So I mean, that's not. I can't think of an issue. Yeah, a lot of times these will flop over because something will go wrong with the rail. Something, and these are heavy too, by the way. So they tend, you can imagine this all being solid brass. There's a fair amount of weight there.
Well, another thing is by design, the majority of them are designed to run out of fuel before you run out of water.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Which is automatic shutdown, so to speak.
The size of the fuel tank is typically sized to be under the capacity of the water for the boiler, be it inlet boiler or in this case like here where it's in the tender as a supplement, so that you will run out of fire more often than not if you fill both containers up to their full extent. You'll run out of fuel, and therefore the fire will go out, and the engine will slowly come to a halt as a normal rule.
I feel we have a great basic understanding of what we're looking at here. And Bob, thank you for joining us on the program tonight. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Anytime.
And once again, thank you for letting us come over and play in your yard.
There'll be more videos in the future here. We'll get Chip involved. See some of the custom-made stuff that he's known for over the years too. Always fun to see the creativity of the members.
Yeah. Chip's very creative with his creations, and he uses a lot of old machinery. Sometimes he'll this retrofit strange things. I don't know. He's got a very creative mind. I hope to get over and film his live steam ups this spring, this summer. As soon as my schedule permits to get over there on the same day, he's running.
Highly recommend for those folks who are intrigued by this subset of the hobby, but aren't maybe ready to sort of jump in initially. Certainly touch base with any of our members or any other live steamers and have them. We'll be glad to have you assist us and guide you in both how to fuel and fire these engines and how to putz with them, just to get a feel for them. And I think at that point, you'll be a number of folks that'll get hooked into it that way, just like the rest of us have over time. So don't be afraid to ask folks if you can get your hands in there and help out on things. Okay.
One of the biggest negative comments on live steam is that the engines are so darn expensive. Well, you have to consider you're talking about a couple 100 degrees. Most every part is machined, and it's metal, no plastics. Plastic wouldn't last maybe one run if you're lucky.
Yeah.
So that's another reason for it. But that means the quality is really, really pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, we've been on the air for about an hour, and that's what we thought we would be able to do tonight. So if any last comments, Bob? No? Yeah. So you guys good to
I'll
go?
think of some after you sign off.
Right. Well, we're looking now for a full summer of garden railroading. This is just to get you. This is our transition meeting, maybe between all the things we've done over the winter. We've shown everybody how to get your equipment prepped and ready and fixed and cleaned and all that kind of stuff. Well, now's the time for the rubber to meet the road here. Although I probably should not use an automotive analogy, but a steam analogy.
We've got a full head of steam now.
Time to get everything out, get stuff cleaned up. And get outside to run. That's
my
the
railroad's
core of the
running
hobby
out
here.
there, just good. Everything's running.
At least half of it.
Yeah, well, I know what's going on with the other one. It when it goes into the end to end or the point to point, if it goes like a 16th of an inch too far, it's like it's too far. It won't go the other way. So you have to just give it just a little push, and that's what it needs right now. It's good to go.
That's why it's called a hobby.
That's why it's a hobby. Yeah.
And Bill, I think you covered it. We covered a lot up to this point, but there's still so much more. And even just looking at Jed's layout with the plants he has, that's a topic we haven't even touched. And there's so many options out there, just so much other stuff. But it's getting warmer, so we'll be outside more and get to see people's layouts more. So
get into more hardcore stuff, actually, shovels and whatnot. As far as getting, well, I know we wanted to talk about tunnels, how to build them. Obviously, road bed are some of the topics here. Wiring up to a point, that's maybe a subset of the whole issue.
I did some wiring yesterday with my brother, Corey, and there were we could have used a little class on it before. There were a lot of four-letter words being said and a lot of sore backs, but we made it through. So
the thing we've always recommended, and we still do to this very day, is start small. Be able to get at least a loop of track up and the ability to run a train on that loop. And then you can spend a lot more time while your trains are running expanding the railroad. Okay? Always a good approach to things as opposed to planning a master railroad and spending a couple years trying to get it all put together. Getting trains out and getting trains to run. It was probably the best motivator we've seen on how to be involved in the hobby, how to maintain interest in the hobby, and how to spur you on to do other things in the hobby.
Yeah. So like I like to say in end of every episode, get out and run in 2021. So thanks everybody for joining us tonight. Please subscribe and like our video. Hit those like buttons down. They're over here somewhere. But like us, subscribe, and come and say hi to us if you see us at a show, and we'll see you around. Take care. well.